Welcome to Technology Integration for PA Educators. Introduction to Technology Integration, Part 2. It is hard to truly learn to integrate technology without understanding how people learn and how technology will benefit your learners. In this module, we will learn theories of how people learn, technology and learning theories, and how to design curriculum with technology in mind. After the completion of this module, learners will be able to define the ADDIE model and explain all 6 steps of the ADDIE design model process. Learners will be able to apply the ADDIE model to their own course design. And learners will be able to describe and apply the characteristics of the constructivist, behaviorist, and cognitivist learning theories. Before we dive in, let's look at the terminology that will be used throughout this module. The first is the ASSURE model. The ASSURE model is a 6-step instructional systems design that is intended to help teachers utilize technology and media in the classroom. Second is cognitivism, which is a learning theory where a learner develops cognitive pathways in understanding and physical response to experiences. In this theory, students learn most effective through reading, text, and lecture instruction. The next is behaviorism, learning theory in which behavioral conditioning can be used as a universal learning process. The last is constructivism, an idea and theory that people are responsible for creating their own understanding of the world and using what they know based on the previous experiences in the process of linking new information to these experiences. People use these experiences and new information to construct their own learning. This quote says, "Using technology to enhance the educational process involves more than just learning how to use specific hardware and software. It requires an understanding of pedagogical principles that are specific to the use of technology in instructional settings. Pedagogy-based trainings begin by helping teachers understand the role of learning theory in the design and function of class activities and in the selection and use of instructional technologies." Oftentimes in trainings, instructors will show faculty how to use the technology, but not talk about the learning theories behind it. And the remaining pieces of this module, we're going to be discussing learning theories and how those are tied to technology. Before you can ask yourself what is effective technology integration, you must first ask yourself the following 2 questions. What are my beliefs about learning and how learning occurs? And what are my institution's beliefs about learning and how learning occurs? Take a few minutes to reflect on these questions and jot down any ideas you have. In the next few minutes, we're going to take a deeper dive into cognitivism, behavioralism, and constructivist learning theories. Take a few minutes and watch the following videos.
Cognitivism. The learning style that best reflects how I learn is cognitivism. The use of tools such as metaphors, mental maps, and organization help my brain process information. Information that is easy to access and understand is easy to learn. Repetition is important to cognitivists for retention and to build schemas in the brain. A good example of this is practicing your multiplication tables. Organization is another important tool for effectively building schema. It is important when working with a cognitive learner to consider cognitive load. The way information is presented can over or underload working memory. Using strategies such as chunking, scaffolding, and instructional design can ensure a student's cognitive load is appropriate. I have identified 3 technology tools that I think would be helpful or effective for a cognitive learner like myself. The first tool is MindMap. MindMap is an interactive website that allows you to create mind and concept maps. Mind maps help organize information and visualize knowledge in the way our brains process it. My second tool is OneNote. OneNote is an online note-taking program that allows you to easily organize information as you type. You can create notebooks, sections, and pages to keep information easy to access and understand. My last tool is Code.org. This is a great example of using scaffolding to build schemas. By learning in small steps, you build on your previous knowledge. Scaffolds are built in when students fulfill challenges and build on their previous learning. And that is cognitivism.
This video is over the Constructivist Learning Theory by Melissa Griswold for my Theory Resource Assignment for IDT 7074 for Dr. Trey Martindale. Constructivism is the theory that we generate knowledge as we experience situations and interpret them. We are actively seeking and making meaning from all of our life experiences. Since knowledge is constructed on an individual's reality and experience, it might not accurately represent reality. Knowledge that is constructed can be altered if new information conflicts or expands on previous information. Knowledge should be tested and verified against the knowledge and reasoning of others, such as parents, teachers, and peers. Learning should be done through context and should be both meaningful and applicable to the real world. Knowledge is not transferred until it is applied. In order to help this, constructivists believe that making lessons personal to students' interests will help them reach a deeper level of understanding because they are motivated and see the learning as purposeful. Typical constructivist goals include solving complex problems, acquiring content knowledge through complex domains, critical thinking, collaboration, reasoning, reflection, and developing personal inquiry skills. Cooperative learning can help students understand both basic views and multiple representations when solving problems to help promote independence and personal accountability. Cooperative learning, critical thinking, and higher order thinking skills are all meant to help students become masters of their own learning. Problem-based learning is an example of constructivism in the classroom. It was initially developed in the 1970s for medical education. Similar to other collaborative methods, students work in groups to solve a real problem by using a variety of resources to derive possible solutions. When generating the problems must raise the concepts and principles relative to the content domain and also be real. The goal is to simulate a real-world environment that students might encounter in order to best transfer and apply their knowledge. Another form of constructivist theory applied to the classroom is inquiry-based learning. Teachers can make learning meaningful when they employ activities that call on students to use their prior knowledge and experiences to construct their own frames of thought. Inquiry approaches require students to use critical thinking skills and to discuss concepts in a non-threatening way. One example of an inquiry-based model uses 3 phases: exploration, discussion and presentation of new content, and application and expansion. The teacher uses guided questioning and lecture to help students form their understanding and clarify any questions that they might have. Inquiry-based learning lessons are difficult to plan, but they are very effective. They can give teachers a way to personalize and contextualize information in such a manner that students can relate it to their own lives. Fincham says that the constructivist theory, as we understand it in here, is as old as our traditions. Plato learned by following Socrates. Socrates taught through insightful questioning that helped form one's own knowledge. He taught a slave boy who had no education the Pythagorean theorem only by the use of questioning. Today, our thoughts on constructivists were originally formed by Piaget. There are several different views on constructivism. 2 of the most popular views are individual and social constructivism. The difference between individual and social constructivism is that the social constructivists place emphasis on the social community. Lewis states that the personal constructivism argues that the universe is no longer a mind-independent existence, and all individuals cannot be expected to have given or uniform cognition. Social constructivism proposes that the cross-community transfer of learning cannot and should not be counted on. Individual constructivism is derived from Piaget's work. He states that knowledge is invented and reinvented as the child develops and interacts with the world surrounding her. Individual constructivist theorists believe that knowledge is constructed more on a personal level from an individual's interactions and own thoughts. Knowledge cannot be transmitted from person to person, but is constructed by the individual. They promote learner-centered and discovery-oriented learning styles. A learner's social environment and interactions are only seen as stimulus for the cognitive development. Social constructivism was derived from the work of Lev Vygotsky. Vygotsky agreed with Piaget's thoughts that knowledge is internalized through one's interactions with the world, but he also gave credit to both social interaction and culture as well. Vygotsky disagreed with the behaviorist approach, calling it too narrow and isolated. Learners construct knowledge through their learning environment, which includes their interactions in society. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist that lived from August 9, 1896 until he died September 16, 1980 at 84 years old. He is known for genetic epistemology, theory of cognitive development, object permanence, egocentrism, and constructivism. He was always trying to answer the question, how does knowledge grow and develop? According to Piaget, the nature of knowledge should be studied empirically where it is actually constructed and developed. Piaget studied the development of children to study how knowledge grows and logic thinking is developed. Through this, he developed the stages of cognitive development, stating that there are 4 stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. It was through this development that he formed his own constructive epistemology, known as individualist constructivism. His theories on constructivism were actually not popularized until the 1960s. Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist that lived from November 19, 1896 until he died June 11, 1934 at the age of only 37 years old. He is known for creating the zone of proximal development and for a branch of constructivism known as social constructivism. Vygotsky created the zone of proximal development to explain how a child learns to complete a goal. The zone of proximal development states that a child will first be unable to complete a goal and then it will be out of his reach. After he has assistance from a teacher or mentor providing scaffolding, he will then be able to complete the goal with help. Furthermore, after this assistance, he will then be able to move on to being actually complete the goal independently and working unassisted. While Vygotsky shared some of Piaget's views, he was more interested in how our intellectual development changed and evolved from birth until death, and he placed more emphasis on the social aspect of learning. It is because of this interest in social aspect of learning, Vygotsky is credited with social constructivism. Behaviorism is the belief that learning happens from repetitive frequency of an observable performance. Learning is caused by a stimulus. Behaviorism is concerned with the association between the stimulus and the response that is made, strengthened, and maintained. The learner plays a passive role in the learning environment. This is drastically different to a constructive belief that learners construct knowledge from their environment and that they should be actively involved in the learning process. Behaviorists use instructional clues, reinforcement, and practice to help ensure learning that is effective when recalling facts and making generalizations, associations, and connections between concepts. It does not effectively address higher-order thinking skills, which is a strong component of the constructivist view. Cognitism was developed in the 1950s as learning theorists shifted away from behavior models to a design that depended on cognitive thinking. Ertmer states that psychologists and educators began to de-emphasize a concern with overt, observable behavior and stressed instead more complex cognitive processes such as thinking, problem-solving, language, concept formation, and information processing. Now, the emphasis is placed on the mental process. They're more concerned with what they know and how knowledge is acquired. Transfer is viewed as how it is stored in the memory. This is contrary to constructivism, which views transfer as actually applying new knowledge to a different scenario.
Adult learning theory was developed out of the need for a specific theory of how adults learn. Most educational theories, as well as formal educational institutions, have been developed exclusively to educate children and youth. Pedagogy, the art and science of teaching children, has dominated educational theory. Pedagogy gives the instructor the major responsibility for making decisions about learning, content, method, and evaluation. Educational psychologists, recognizing the limitations of formal education theories, have developed andragogy, a theory of adult learning. Malcolm Knowles is most frequently associated with adult learning theory. Knowles' model is based on several assumptions. Adults have the need to know why they're learning something. Adults have to be self-directed. Adults bring more work-related experiences into the learning situation. Adults enter a learning experience with a problem-centered approach to learning, and adults are motivated to learn by both extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. Adult learning theory is especially important to consider in developing training programs because the audience for many such programs tends to be adults, most of whom have not spent a majority of their time in formal education settings. Here are some implications of adult learning theory for training. Consider how adult learning theory is incorporated into training programs. Self-concept, mutual planning, and collaboration in instruction. Experience, use learner experiences as a basis for examples and applications. Readiness, develop instruction based on the learner's interests and competencies. Time perspective, immediate application of content, and orientation to learning, problem-centered instead of subject-centered. Consider how adult learning theory is incorporated into your training programs.
Now that you've watched some videos on what these learning theories are, let's take a look at some technologies that support these learning theories. In the theory of cognitivism, we learn that memory is a key process in learning. It is teacher-centric and is comprised of lecture presentations. Experiences that are beneficial to learners include lecture, visual tools, and memorization. One technology that is going to support this theory is called Quizlet. It's a technology that allows you to create flashcards online. Now that we've looked at the videos that tell us about the learning theories, as well as the technology that can support those theories, let's take a look at what this looks like in PA education. I've created a scenario for you that incorporates both a learning theory and the technology that supports it. An instructor for an anatomy course in a physician assistant program begins with a review of the parts of the brain. After the lecture, the instructor provides the students with an online set of terminology flashcards and an online interactive brain puzzle to help students memorize the parts of the brain and their functions. The next learning theory that we're talking about is behaviorism. The technology that supports behaviorism is Kahoot or Poll Everywhere. In the theory of behaviorism, promotion of correct behavior and discouragement of wrong is key. Positive and negative reinforcements. Experiences that are beneficial to learners in this theory are practice and reinforcements. Kahoot is game-based. It's gamification. It's allowing students to get points for getting correct answers. Let's take a look at what this learning theory and technology looks like in PA education. An instructor for a physician assistant program creates a game of Kahoot for students to test their knowledge as they move through an ENT course. Each student logs into Kahoot individually, and students are provided points for how fast they answer and if their answers are correct. The next learning theory that we looked at is constructivism. In constructivism, learning happens by creating meaningful experiences, real-life situations, and real-life settings, and creating a good learning experience. It also allows learners to collaborate. Experiences that are beneficial to learners in this learning theory are working in teams to collaborate, peer review, and active learning. Technologies that might support this theory include Canvas, Google, and Medscape. Let's take a look at how the constructivist learning theory and the technologies that can support it can be used in PA education. In this scenario, students in a PA program are given a case study. Instead of typing out each case study in a Word document, an online medical student simulation program is used. This program provides a picture of the patient, their background, previous lab values, and so forth. Students work in groups of 3 to determine the best method of treatment for their patient based on the knowledge they have gained from their simulation. You could take this a step further and use Google as a place for them to store their group work and suggestions for this patient. When using technology to support instruction in pedagogically sound ways, faculty must look at the whole curriculum. Instructors must select or adapt instructional technology to match the objectives based on the student's needs, looking at things like age appropriateness, content appropriateness. They must be comfortable using technology as both the student and the instructor. Oftentimes, instructors only learn technology for themselves and are unsure how to help with troubleshooting in the classroom, which will really quickly run you out of time with your activity. If instructors are not comfortable with technology as both the instructor and the student Oftentimes, panic can set in and the activity will be scrapped altogether. And lastly, they must evaluate the technology and curriculum. Instructors have to look at the technology that they've incorporated and see if it's effective, how to improve it, how to replace it, or see what's next. Next, we're going to look at designing with technology in mind. There are many design models in the instructional design world, but today we're going to focus on the Assure model as it targets implementation of technology in the classroom. This is the Assure model. This model is designed to help you as an instructor look at your curriculum as a whole as you incorporate technology into it. The first step of the Assure model is the step of analyzing your learners. This is the process of defining what is to be learned. Here you would do a needs assessment, problem identification, a task analysis, learner profile, description of constraints, needs, and a problem statement. The second step of the Assure model is to state your objectives. In this section, you would write your objectives, develop test items, plan instruction, and identify resources. For the third step of the Assure model, you have the select your methods, media, and materials step. In this step, you will decide on the technologies that you would like to use in your instruction. In the fourth step of the Assure model is to utilize your media and materials. This is where you actually implement it into your classes and use that technology. The fourth step of the Assure model is to require participation from your learners. Think about how you're going to have your learners engage using the technology that you've selected. The last step of the Assure model is the evaluate and revise step. In this step, you will look at your technology that you used and whether it was effective or not. You will look at things to improve your technology choices and maybe even select a different technology for next time. For the next few slides, we're going to use this worksheet to process through a lesson that you could use the Assure model to develop your curriculum with. You're going to want to start with a lesson title. In this case, we're going to be looking at eukaryotic cells. And the first step of the Assure model is to analyze your learners. You want to look at things such as general characteristics, age, gender, geography and location, accessibility needs. Are they teachers? Are they students? Are there any prerequisite skills or knowledge? What are their learning styles? And what are their motivations? Why are they taking this course? What are their needs? For our case, we're looking at PA students. So we know we have physician assistant students, they're adult learners, they all have an undergraduate degree, they have met prereqs to get into the program, and they have a 2,000 hour minimum of healthcare experience. The next step is to state your objectives or your standards. In this case, I've made it something very basic. Describe the general structure and main components of a eukaryotic cell. Next, we have the third step of the Assure model, selecting strategies, technologies, media, and materials for your module. Media should be selected on the basis of student need. We have to consider a total learning situation and should follow learning objectives. Should be appropriate for the teaching format, should be consistent with students' capabilities and learning styles, and should be selected in order to best meet the learning outcomes. In this case, one of the medias that I've decided is Google Slides, and the way that I would use that is to create an empty slide deck and assign groups of students to build 1 to 3 pages that provides information on each cell component. At the end, we'll have a complete slide deck that'll give you information over all the parts and pieces of a eukaryotic cell. The fourth step is to utilize your selected materials. In this step, you want to preview your material. Never use anything in class you haven't walked through thoroughly. You want to prepare your material, making sure you have everything you need and that it all works the way you want it to. You need to set up the classroom so that whatever you're doing will work in the space that you have, and prepare the learners by giving them an overview and explaining how they can take this information and use it and how they will be evaluated eventually. In this case, we're going to be using Google Slides. So we want to ensure the slide deck is shared with students and editable, ensure students are able to collaborate with students across sites, and give clear directions to students. For the fifth step of the Assure model, we want to require our learners' participation and talk about how we're going to do that. In this case, Google Slides, students will be required to participate with their group in class as a TBL. The last step of the Assure model is to evaluate and revise. Things to consider are, were the media, technology, tool, and materials effective? How to determine whether or not a student met the objectives, and how to determine whether or not the instructor performance was effective.